Hello everyone, welcome to this episode of Beyond the Barclay, ahead of our game with West Bromwich Albion on Saturday. I'm joined with Adrian Goldberg, presenter of the Liquidator podcast. Hi Adrian, how are you?
How are you doing? Yeah, the number one West Bromwich Albion podcast. There's about 5 of them at the moment. It's all going wild, but they're all worth listening to, of course. But ours is the best.
Yeah, of course.
I was telling you before we came on air as well. I've got a book coming out in the summer called "Where's the Money Gone?" Published on Byline Books, which is about football, fans, and finance. So I think we've both had our share of ups and downs financially over the years. So "Where's the Money Gone?" Look out for that in the summer. That's also the name of a podcast to do with a guy called Charlie Methven, who some of your listeners might remember. He was on the Sunderland Till I Die documentary. Yeah. Director of Charlton Athletic, and now a chief executive of, he was director of Sunderland, and now chief executive of Charlton. So, loads of good listening for you to follow up after this and reading.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Morgan's finally joined us.
Hey!
I was just getting into apologies for my tardiness.
Well, you're here now, so that's the main thing, and you've got your cup of tea in hand, so all good.
You've got the important things right, Morgan. Hello.
How you doing, buddy? Thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
Yeah, it's I think if we just perhaps sort of jump into some of the questions that we'd set you, Adrian, if that's all right. I mean, West Brom obviously a similar club to Norwich in the sense that we've had that sort of Premier League and Championship yo-yoing. Do you enjoy that unpredictability, or do you wish for a bit more stability?
Well, I like the unpredictability of football. I think that's what makes it fun. And I think at the top end of football, it's much less predictable than it used to be. And you've got a stranglehold of half a dozen clubs, really, not just on the Premier League, but on the top honours in the game. And that's partly what my book's about, really, is how that has come about. As a fan, I remember when we were getting relegated last time, quite a few people said, oh, well, at least, we'll have a bit more fun in the Championship. Yeah. But like at any level of football, it's sort of only fun if you're winning, isn't it? That's kind of presupposes you're going to be in the top 2 or 3. We're at the time of recording this, we are 6th, I think. Yeah. And even though that's a reasonable performance, isn't it? It doesn't feel like fun, or it hasn't felt like fun at various points this season. No. So I think, like a lot of fans, in theory, I embrace the unpredictability, but actually in reality, I want to see my team winning every week.
Well, you do, and I think you look at you had a reasonable start to the season under Carlos Carvajal, right? And then he's up and left. I mean, how's it going under the new old manager, shall we call him?
Yeah. Carlos Corberán was our manager.
Not Carvajal,
Yeah. And Corberán had done a great job, because when he took over, if people aren't aware, we were really on the skids financially. We had a Chinese owner called Guo Lai, and like a lot of Chinese owners, he got involved at a time when the Chinese government was encouraging its entrepreneurs to invest abroad. And then kind of China caught a cold, didn't it? He kind of realised maybe they just were a bit naive as a nation, that you actually lose lots of money running a football club once you're out the Premier League. So he hadn't got a clue how to stop the rot. And when Corberán took over, we were, after his first game on that, by 5 o'clock on that Saturday, we were bottom of the table. Right. And did a great job, kept us up, nearly got us into the playoffs in his first season, got us into the playoffs in his second season, which was last year when we lost to Southampton, and this year had us in the top 6 as well. But after a couple of years, the football was starting, if I'm honest, to get a little bit stale, very risk averse, very kind of slow build up. Some great goals, by the way. We've got some fantastic goals, but not enough of them. So Tony Mowbray, who got us promoted back in 2008, has come back, and much loved, but I'd say by most Albion fans. 1 or 2 people, there's always big grudges I find on social media, but I think after Corberán and the kind of the caution of that reign, I think people have welcomed the kind of more front foot approach of Mowbray, but it hasn't necessarily translated into better results yet. But, he's a good manager, I think. And, we're a team who'll try and attack and try and win a game.
What's your sort of so forgive me for I mean, I've kept my head in the sand this championship season just because of the unpredictability of it. But so what's the sort of style of play under Mowbray then?
So Mowbray is definitely an attacking player, likes to play with two wingers. So depending on who's in form and fitness and all that, he would like to play with Tom Fellows, who's attracted a lot of interest supposedly from Everton in the Premier League on the right, or with Mikey Johnston, or not all with, and with Mikey Johnston on the left, who cuts inside.
Yeah.
He's rehabilitated a guy called John Swift, who a lot of the fans had kind of given up hope on. Very classy player. Mowbray loves players with soft feet, as he calls it, and he's rehabilitated Swift, but Swift will try and spread passes out to right or left wing, and will try and get balls into the box. So it is very much a front foot kind of approach, and although we will generally have kind of a, flat back four, we do try and get the wing backs forward as well. So Isaac Price has come into the team since the January transfer window. Northern Ireland international. It was on Everton's book, went to Standard Liège in Belgium. We got him in January on a 3.5-year deal. That's really looking like very good business. So we haven't scored enough goals, and we've had injuries up top with Madja, who was the leading scorer in the division for a time. He's been injured. Daryl Dike, who Madja was signed to replace because Dike had such a bad injury record. He started to come back now, Dike, coming on as sub. We thought we'd solve it when we signed Adam Armstrong from Southampton. He's such a proven goal scorer at this level.
Yeah.
But so far, he's got a couple, but he hasn't looked really on it at the moment. Yeah. But we will try and attack. We will try and score. And I do feel that we've got some goals in us yet to come. That may just be wishful thinking, of course.
Well, I mean, against our defence, that's probably going to become apparent. I mean, we've not been great, but I mean, going forward, we've got the. I don't think I'm not sure if he still is the Championship top goal scorer, but he certainly was up until very recently in ball signs. But Josh,
and the game. Sorry to interrupt you, but I mean, the game at the Hawthorns was a pulsating game of football. Yeah. 2-2 draw. Saints was fantastic. Yeah. We didn't win, but that was a game I really enjoyed, actually. I just thought there was a real energy about that match. I just thought it was a really brilliant game. But, it's why you go to football, that game was.
Yeah, I think sorry, Jez. I think after that, we sort of curtailed off a little bit, and then we had our problems with injuries as well. And obviously, a few FA decisions go really well and truly against us. And since that, Saints has come back, and it's taken time for him to land on his feet again. So I think that was the sliding doors moment for our season, that a particularly challenging November and December, where we lost a lot of players due to injury and suspension. And I think we didn't really ever bounce back from that, Jez. Do you think that'd be fair to say?
Yeah, I think it's very fair to say, yeah. And I think all of the above really is to the reasons why. And I think, we're now in a bit of a rut, I guess. Our form hasn't been great over the last month or so because of those sort of.
Have you guys written off playoffs then? Have you kind of expected that you're coming up?
I think
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, we went away to Bristol City. I think that was the last game. It feels like ages ago because of the international break. But, we were 2-0 down after about 15, 20 minutes. And it was like, that's where we start looking at it and thinking, this isn't going to be our season. But we always kind of thought this might be the case this year with the new coach and new ways of working, etc. But Morgan, I think it might be time for the next question, sir.
Yeah, so going back to, you mentioned the game at the Hawthorns. So it's a reputation for being a fairly tough place to go. What's the best atmosphere that you've ever experienced there?
Okay, so for that, I go back to 93 and the playoff semi-final against Swansea City. We had a miserable time of it between, I'm just trying to think when it was, but basically from, 1985-86 to 2002 was the longest period Albion had ever been outside the top flight, 16 years. And in that 16 years, truly, we only had one good season. And that was this season, 92-93, under Ozzy Ardiles.
Oh, wow.
And he left us at the end of that season to go to Spurs. And obviously he had a big connection with that club. But we played Swansea in a playoff semi-final, second leg, the days when there was still terracing. And there was the sense that Albion are on the way back. And we'd lost 1-0 in the first leg, but we absolutely blew them away. And it was just the ground was bouncing from about 15, 20 minutes beforehand. It's where Boing Boing really took off. It had been growing that season. You know what we do when we score, the whole Boing Boing thing. It really took off that night. And I was sitting in the stands because I went with my dad and my niece to that game. They were not quite up to the jumping around on the terraces, but even in the old Rainbow stand where we sat, it was bouncing. It was just a phenomenal, and people talk about it to this day. And my co-host on the Albion podcast, I did the Liquidator, Chris Lepkowski, who's written a fantastic book about those 16 miserable years. he missed it. He was ill that night. But anybody who was there, I mean, obviously you've got to be of a certain vintage now to remember that night, but it was absolutely phenomenal. The joint was absolutely jumping. Unfortunately, I'd say at the moment, and it's partly driven by the way football is, changes in the way grounds are, and partly by kind of this expectation that we should be in the top 2 or 3, which I don't think is a rational expectation, but it's there. You know, a club perceived to be big. The atmosphere isn't quite like that at the moment. Yeah. But I think as we close in on the last few weeks of the season, I think if we get a couple of good results, it will pick up again. So obviously we're looking at the Norwich game, albeit that it's away from home, and thinking, you know, that's an away game to target for 3 points, maybe.
Yeah. You've got, I mean, in fairness, if you can hold your position in the playoffs, you can beat off the competition. You know, you're coming into the proper business end of the season. I'm sure that, you know, you'll get groundswell of fans behind you if you can get a few of those results. Hopefully not against Norwich, I think, you know, you'll be there or thereabouts, surely.
Yeah, I think so. I'm reasonably confident that we'll get top 6, and our record against the likes of Leeds, Sheffield United, Burnley suggests that we've nothing to fear from those clubs. Yeah. You know, if we can make the top 6, get into the playoffs, we've got a a puncher's chance, as they say in boxing, haven't we? But I think maybe more than that. You know, we're not bad, but I think, you know, you probably exemplify this even more than we do, in that on your day you can be very good, and we saw that at the Hawthorns. On our day we can be very good. But I often think that the difference between Championship players and Premier League players isn't so much skill, although there may be an element of that, but it is about the ability to reproduce that week in, week out, to be consistent, both physically and mentally. And I don't think we've got players that can do that.
Yeah, we
haven't.
I would agree with Norwich. I mean, we have a lot of really young players that have come in from from Eastern Europe and the mid center of Europe and different things. So, like you said, it's a mentality thing. We were 1-0 up against Blackburn against 10 men until they scored in the last kick of the game, because we didn't know how to game manage it. And I think that comes with a few experienced heads and better mentality. So I think that's probably also added to our woes. Sounds a bit melodramatic, but woes this season is just not having players who are used to the rigors of the Championship, if you will.
Absolutely. No, and I think it is, personally, I think it's a bit stupidly relentless. I'd reduce the Championship down to 20 clubs and have 38 games. And I know clubs have to take a financial hit for that to happen, but I think it would be better for players. I do. There's always the argument about, that it's not a real job and all they've got to do is run around a football pitch. But I think you can tell you've suffered a lot of injuries this season. We've suffered a lot of injuries this season. And I think the combination of 46 games And all the extra time that we're now playing at the end of matches and the end of halves is telling physically on players, and it isn't good. It isn't good for their welfare, I don't think.
I think when you chuck in the international aspect of that, because the majority of teams in especially the higher end championship do have, what do you reckon, 50, 60, 70% of their players are internationals as well.
So, that's an issue, and you chuck the travel into that. But I mean, as they say, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But I think it. I mean, really, you want to go and see the players who are the best players that your club has got, and if they're getting kind of stress injuries, if they're getting injuries that are caused simply by overplaying, putting too much burden on their body, then as fans we're being shortchanged, aren't we? So it's not ideal.
So just moving on to the next question, and this one's around sort of goals that West Brom have scored. So if you could relive one West Brom goal in person, which one would it be and why?
Okay, well, listen, you guys will know, perhaps, I don't know how old you are. Cyril Regis scored a goal against Norwich City that was goal of the season. You remember that? Or are you aware of that?
Oh, obviously aware of Cyril Regis, but I think we may have been a little bit, certainly before my time. I'm not sure about Morgan.
I'm 1 year older than you, Jez.
Well, listen, Cyril Regis scored a great goal, and you can go back and look at this, and, it's just a classic Regis burst from the halfway line, defenders backing off, defenders opening up in front of him because they're not quite sure what to do, and he lets fly from about 30 yards, back of the net, goal of the season. Brilliant goal. That's not the goal, though, even though I wanted to rub it in and mention it to you again. That's not the goal that I'd love to see again. I was privileged to see Cyril Regis' debut against Rotherham United, which was a League Cup game, I think in late August, early September. And nobody quite knew what they were going to get from this kid. He signed for £5,000 from Hayes, a non-league team in London. Right. And then the following Saturday, he made his debut in the old First Division, and nobody, even though he'd scored two, one of them a penalty against Rotherham, they were lower division opposition, weren't really up to much, and it was great for him to get on the score sheet. But the following Saturday, we played Middlesbrough, and this was in the age before every game was televised, but I was there, and I saw Regis score his first trademark goal, which was very similar to the one that he scored against Norwich, that was goal of the season, picking up the ball on halfway, waltzing around two or three defenders, and bang, letting it go. Now that's how I remember it. It may not have been that good. I'd love to see that goal again, and it would also mean I was probably about 15, which wouldn't be bad either.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, it sounds similar to, maybe liken it to a Norwich goal. I remember Darren Huckabee scored a goal against the Blues, Birmingham City, where he's taken it around about 5 or 6 players and then just rifled it into the top right-hand corner from memory. And so it sounds like Cyril Regis may have been a very similar player to Huckabee.
Yeah, no, I mean, Regis was, I was privileged to see that team that in the late 70s, the breakthrough team of black players with Cyril, with Laurie Cunningham and with Brendan Batson, obviously very socially important, I mean, in a way that maybe is difficult to understand if you're growing up now. And it's good in a way if you find that hard to understand, because it's like, why did people object to people on the colour of the skin? Absolutely crazy, but that was part of the story, but also gifted, in all three of them, very gifted footballers, and Cyril probably my favourite Albion player of all time, of players that I've seen. But
I'm pleased you mentioned Cyril Regis, because I think when I think of West Brom, I do think of him, and not, as you say, not being of an age of being able to witness him play football, but I've certainly seen sort of videos of his goals, and he's a stereotypical probably club legend, is he? I'd say.
Oh, absolutely. I mean that late 70s team. I mean, you kind of that there's a danger there because of the social significance that you overlook Tony Brown, who's still around as a commentator for local radio. Yeah. Tony Brown, club record goal scorer, club record appearance maker. I started going down in the mid 70s, and he was already a club legend. He'd already been there about a decade.
Yeah.
And yet, in my time and watching those players in the late 70s and early 80s, he was one of the best players in that team as well. So in that era, we had some great players. But over the years, like most teams, you get players that you love and that you kind of take to your heart. And even now we've got one or two. My daughter's comes with me now. My youngest daughter is 10, and it's great to watch football through her eyes and see the players that she loves and warms to as well. So, yeah, that's nice.
Brilliant. Just before we move on to the next question, we have quite a relatively good women's section at Norwich as well. So is that something that she follows with West Brom? Have West Brom got a good women's section?
Not as good as it could be. We were in tight. She plays, by the way. She's a goalkeeper for a local team. But we went to see West Brom played Wolves. And,
spicy.
Yeah, well, it was one of those games where, although normally they play at a local non-league ground, they opened up a stand at the Hawthorns and tried to encourage people to come. And so we play in the third tier of women's football.
Yeah.
And obviously you've got your WSL, you've got your Championship, and then you've got, I think, National League North we play in. Unfortunately, Wolves thumped us 8-0.
Oh, no.
Not a good,
good
introduction to it.
And as the old saying goes, we were lucky to get nil. We were dreadful. And they were very good. Although we have since beaten them. I don't quite know how. We've since beaten them in a cup game. So, but yeah, no, I mean, and the owners that we have now, we managed to get rid of the Guachan Lai, and we've now got sort of American owners, Shilan Patel and a company called Bilkul who are behind us, and they have now brought the women's section under the umbrella of the football club.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening at Norwich as well. I think obviously there's a big groundswell for women's football in the US because obviously they're World Cup champions, so I think that's can only be a healthy thing. And watching clubs like West Brom and Norwich develop their women's side it's really good to be part of actually and see it develop and be on the journey with them as so they say. So yeah, it's only going to get better.
I think so. Yeah. And I think, my daughter wouldn't now think twice about going to football, about watching football, whereas my sisters grew up and it was, they would only go with a boyfriend, whereas I like to think my daughter would go with her mates, and thankfully it's a sign of something positive and some progress in society, 100%.
Definitely. Yeah. Morgan, let's move on to the next question.
So you've sort of, obviously you talked a bit about some of your favourite players, but Norwich and West Brom have shared some over the years. Do any stand out to you? You can be bold as to say whether they were good or bad. It's fine.
No, well, when you asked that question, I gave it a bit of thought, but really a player jumped out to me straight away. Actually, there was one who stood head and shoulders above, and it was a guy. Again, you're probably too young to remember him. A guy called Rule Fox.
Oh God, yeah, I remember Rule Fox.
Yeah. Well, Rule Fox came to the Hawthorns under Gary Megson. So I mentioned this 16 years of misery, apart from the 1 year when we went to Wembley, having had that amazing playoff semi-final against Swansea, and we went on to beat Port Vale and got back into what is now the Championship. But at the end of that period, we had Gary Megson. So Gary Megson was the manager, Sir Gary Megson, as we call him, the manager who turned that round. Again, somebody with a Norwich connection, of course, Gary Megson. Yeah. And I think it may have been because he played for Norwich, didn't he, Gary Megson?
Yeah, he had managed us as well a couple of times.
Yeah, and I think because of his connection as a player, because he was still relatively young as a manager when he came to us, he brought Rule Fox in when we were looking to get promoted out of the Championship into the Premier League. And Fox, the wily old Fox, he just had that thing that some players do when they've been around a bit. He knew just when to slow the game down, when to stand on the ball. And compared to the players that we had over a number of years, and even Megson's team, which essentially was a team of good, honest triers who were really well organised by Megson, Fox had a touch of quality. He had a touch much of class. So very much a fan of Rolf Fox, and that was a very positive crossover.
Yeah.
We also noticed Steve Bruce, ex-Norwich, of course.
Yeah.
One of our worst ever managers. And he took us. It's amazing. You think of Steve Bruce, isn't it? He's got 4 promotions on his CV. Even now, he's got a job at Blackpool. You look at his CV, and you think that is a good CV. But by the time he came to us, there was a real feeling of like managers have their time.
Yeah.
And he was absolutely dreadful at the Albion. It was a difficult situation. We were having to cut costs. We were, the parachute payments were running out. So, to be fair to him, there were things going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
But the lack of tactical nous, the lack of motivation that some of the players appear to show, it was pretty poor, really.
Yeah. Was he at Villa when?
He'd been at Villa before. Again, you never. You've always kind of, one of our greatest players of modern times was Kevin Phillips, Super Kev, who had played for Villa. Yeah. But generally, because they play for Villa, that's an immediate no-no in our book. Come on. The whole world of football to sign players from, and you choose a player from Villa. No, thank you. And so he did have that time, but we would have forgiven him if he'd been any good. Talking of which, by the way, you had, and again, you guys might be too young, we signed a Villa player going years back, and he was an absolute dud for us, John Dean. Yeah. But he ended up having a decent career at Norwich, didn't he?
Yeah.
I think, we were celebrating the Milk Cup win this year, so it's 40 years since we did that in 85. And I'm almost certain I'll probably be ridiculed for this. I'm sure John Dean was in that team. But he did go on and manage us for a few games as well, a few years, should I say. But, the ones I wanted to mention, Adrian, and we mentioned it just before we came on the call, and he'd kill me if I didn't mention him, was Leon Barnett, first and foremost. And a few others like Rob Earnshaw, Graham Dorrans, Wes Houlihan played for you for a bit, didn't he?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Houlihan was never quite up to the mark. You could see he had skill. Dorrans was much loved at Albion. In Dorrans' era at Albion, under Tony Mowbray, we got promoted to the Premier League. Dorrans was a fantastic player.
Yeah.
Much loved at Albion. We mentioned before we started recording Yusuf Malumbu.
Yeah. Oh, yes, we had Malumbu.
Malumbu and Dorrans in midfield, really exciting. Malumbu was a tough tackler, but had a goal in him. Dorrans was a very skillful driving player.
Yeah.
The players that were really liked. There's one I wanted to ask you about as well. Because this player now, he's had a fantastic season, and he's a cup winner. Yet when he played for Albion, maybe it's just us, he just looked, again, another complete dud, but he's turned his career around. We had him on loan from Newcastle, was Jacob Murphy.
Oh, yeah, of course you guys had him, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I think he's had that he's sort of grown into his career a little bit, I think, and because his twin brother now plays for Portsmouth, Josh. But out of the two, I think Josh came through and looked like the one that was going to make it. But when Jacob came through, he looked the mustard. And I think he went away to, we sold him to Newcastle, didn't quite work. But as you've said, he's won the Carabao Cup the other week, and it actually looks like his luck's turning a little bit.
Well, I can't believe how good he's looked at times when I've seen Newcastle this season. He does look like a proper player, but he looked, he looked scared when he played for Albion. But good luck to him. He's stuck in there and done stuff. Yeah.
How are we for time, Adrian?
Let's have a look. Okay. Go on quickly. Last one then.
Okay. So what we'll do, I'm going to, instead of asking the last question, Morgan likes to do a random question of the week. So that'll be when we finish. So Morgan, if you just like to go for your random question of the week, please.
Oh, thanks, Jez. You'll like this, Adrian. I hope you do. Anyway, random question of the week.
Lovely.
Right. So, Adrian, your surname is Goldberg, is it not?
Correct.
So we're mixing things up. We're thinking about James Bond films. So we obviously got Man with the Golden Gun, GoldenEye, and Goldfinger, of course. So if you could, you and Adrian Childs are hanging out, and you're like, let's watch a James Bond film, but you guys would come up with a gold themed James Bond title. What would it be, and why?
What? What? A gold-themed James Bond title, and why? I tell you what, maybe call it Golden Balls and have David Beckham playing James Bond.
That was quick.
Yeah,
That was brilliant.
Not necessarily good, but quick.
Yeah, I'll take that. That was fantastic. What about you, Jez?
maybe perhaps maybe a bit of a Spandau Ballet sort of remake. So, you know, I don't know, because obviously one of their songs was called Gold, wasn't it? But I'm frantically trying to think of a song that could be linked to, or who it could play. So, who was the lead singer of Spandau Ballet? Forget his name now.
Tony Hadley.
Yeah, well, perhaps Tony Hadley being James Bond, and yeah, I don't know. That's the only thing I could think of at such short notice, Morgan. But I must do better for next week.
It's fine. I dropped it on you both. No, it's been great. Thank you, Adrian, for that.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian.
And obviously, you know, hope we beat you, but always a pleasant trip away to Norwich. I can't make it this week, but I try and make it most years to Norwich, and always a great away day. A long trip, but a good away day.
Of course. And just before you go, if you could just plug your podcast and book once more, just for the listeners.
Yeah, if people want to hear more Albion stuff, they can have a listen to me Liquidator podcast. If they're interested in football finance, then look out for my book that's coming out in the summer called Where's the Money Gone? And that's also the name of a podcast I make with Charlie Methven, who is Chief Executive of Charlton.
Fantastic. Well, thanks once again. It's been an absolute pleasure, and best of luck for the rest of the season after Saturday.
Likewise.
That's it for this episode of Beyond the Barkley. Thanks so much for listening. Your support means the world to us. Don't forget to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform and leave a review if you enjoyed the show. You can also catch all our episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. And if you've got any questions, stories, or topics you'd like us to cover, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, on the ball, City.